Captain Marcus Chen had seen many strange things during his 15 years of deep space exploration, but nothing quite like this. The distress signal was unlike anything in the standard galactic communication protocols. It came from a system marked as forbidden territory on every star chart he'd ever seen. The signal itself was haunting. Not the usual digital burst of coordinates and ship identification codes, but something that sounded almost musical, like a desperate song carried across the void. His ship's AI, Area, had been analyzing it for 3 hours now. "Captain, the signal appears to be biological in nature," Area reported in her calm, synthetic voice. "It's being transmitted directly from living neural tissue, not through any technological device." Marcus frowned at the readout on his console. As the only human aboard the exploration vessel Prometheus, he often relied on his instincts when the data didn't make sense. Right now, every instinct he had was screaming that someone needed help. "Arya, what do we know about this system? Why is it marked forbidden?" "Records indicate it's the home system of the Zephyrian Empire, Captain. They were once the most powerful civilization in this galaxy sector. However, all contact was lost approximately 200 years ago. The Galactic Council declared the system off-limits after several investigation teams never returned." Marcus stared at the star map. The Zephyrians had been legendary. Their technology was said to be thousands of years ahead of most species, their culture refined and ancient. They had ruled over 47 different worlds before vanishing without explanation. "Sir, I must advise against approaching," Arya continued. "The probability of survival for previous expeditions to this system appears to be 0. But Marcus was already plotting a course. Something about that signal tugged at him in a way he couldn't explain. It reminded him of the stories his grandmother used to tell him about Earth's old days, when humans would risk everything to answer a call for help from strangers. "Arya, prep the ship for jump. We're going in." "Captain, this violates multiple Galactic Council regulations. I am required to—" "Override accepted under Emergency Rescue Protocol 7, Marcus interrupted. "That signal is a distress call. Someone is dying out there." The jump took 6 hours. When they emerged from hyperspace, Marcus found himself looking at a system in chaos. 3 of the 9 planets were nothing but asteroid fields. The others showed signs of massive bombardment. Space debris floated everywhere, the remains of what must have been an enormous fleet. But the 4th planet still showed signs of life. Faint energy readings, breathable atmosphere, and that signal was coming from there. Stronger now, more desperate. "Area, can you translate any of this?" "Working on it, Captain." "The language appears to be similar to ancient Zephyrian, but there are unusual elements. It's as if someone is trying to communicate in a language they barely remember." As they approached the planet's surface, Marcus could see the ruins of massive cities. Crystalline spires that must have once reached the clouds now lay shattered across continents. But in the northern hemisphere there was still one structure intact. A palace of sorts made from what looked like living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. The signal was coming from there. "Captain, I'm detecting life signs. 14 individuals, but their biological readings are strange. They appear to be in some kind of stasis, but failing." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. 14 people, maybe the last of their entire civilization, dying slowly while sending out a desperate call for help that no one had answered for who knows how long. "Take us down, Area. Landing bay coordinates? There appears to be a docking structure still functional on the palace's east side." "Captain, are you certain about this? We have no idea what destroyed this civilization." Marcus was already suiting up. "Arya, sometimes you just have to trust that doing the right thing will work out. It's a very human trait." As the Prometheus settled onto the crystal landing platform, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to become part of something much bigger than a simple rescue mission. The palace was beautiful, even in its damaged state. The crystal walls seemed to respond to his presence, glowing brighter as he approached. The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped onto an alien world for the first time in his career. The atmosphere was breathable, sweet with the scent of something like jasmine, but underneath it was the smell of decay, of a world slowly dying. The signal was stronger now, almost overwhelming. It pulled at something deep in his mind, a recognition he couldn't explain. As he walked toward the palace entrance, Marcus realized that whatever he found inside was going to change everything. Not just for him, but maybe for the entire galaxy. The massive doors, made from the same living crystal as the walls, slowly opened at his approach. Beyond them lay darkness, but also hope. Someone in there was still alive, still fighting, still believing that help would come. Marcus Chen, the only human in 3,000 light years, stepped into the dying palace of an extinct empire, ready to do what humans did best: help complete strangers no matter the cost. The interior of the palace was breathtaking. Even in its weakened state, the living crystal walls pulsed with soft patterns of light that seemed to respond to Marcus's heartbeat. The corridors were vast, designed for beings much taller than humans, but somehow the proportions felt welcoming rather than intimidating. Marcus followed the signal deeper into the palace. Arya's voice crackled through his comm system as interference from the crystal walls grew stronger. "Captain, readings are 14 life signs. Central chamber. Be careful." The signal was no longer just sound. Marcus could feel it in his mind, desperate and pleading. Images flashed before his eyes. Faces of ethereal beauty, tall and graceful beings with skin that seemed to shimmer like starlight, eyes that held the weight of centuries. The Zephyrians. At the end of a long corridor lined with what appeared to be portraits, Marcus found massive double doors carved with intricate symbols. They opened silently at his approach, revealing a circular chamber that took his breath away. 14 crystal pods were arranged in a circle around a central platform. Each pod contained a Zephyrian in deep stasis, their faces peaceful but pale. They were exactly as the images had shown him. Tall, elegant beings with elongated limbs and features that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Their skin had a faint luminescence like moonlight on water, but they were dying. Marcus didn't need Arya's readings to see that. The crystal pods were cracked, their energy systems failing. Some of the Zephyrians looked almost transparent, as if they were fading from existence itself. At the center of the circle stood a young Zephyrian who was still conscious, though barely. She couldn't have been more than a teenager by her people's standards, but her eyes held ancient wisdom and desperate hope. Her silver hair flowed around her like liquid mercury, and when she saw Marcus, those eyes widened in surprise. She spoke, and somehow Marcus understood her words, though she wasn't speaking any language he knew. You came. After all this time, someone came." Her voice was like music, but heavy with exhaustion and grief. Marcus removed his helmet, breathing the sweet air of the chamber. "I'm Marcus Chen, captain of the Earth vessel Prometheus. I received your distress signal." "Earth?" The young Zephyrian's eyes grew even wider. "The humans—" "But you are so far from your home. Why did you come?" "Because someone needed help," Marcus said simply, moving closer to examine the failing pods. "What happened here? Who are these people?" The girl's expression crumpled with sorrow. "I am Princess Lyrily, last of the Zephyrian royal guard. These are my family. What remains of the Zephyrian crown? My parents, my siblings, my grandparents, my cousins, the last 14 members of the royal bloodline." She gestured weakly at the pods. 3 years ago, our empire was attacked by something we called the Devourers. Beings of pure energy that consumed not just life, but the very essence of existence itself. They swept through our 47 worlds in less than a month. Marcus felt his heart clench as he looked at the failing systems. Each pod represented not just a life, but an entire civilization's hope for survival. My father, the Emperor, used the last of our planet's energy to put the royal family into deep stasis, while I remained awake to guard them. He said that if anyone could find a solution, it would be someone who thought differently than we do, someone who didn't follow the logical paths that failed us. "And you've been sending that signal for 3 years?" Marcus asked, horrified. Lyrily nodded weakly. "I have perhaps days left before the pods fail completely. The palace's power core is dying. When it fails, they die with it." She looked at Marcus with eyes full of desperate hope. "I do not know why you came, human, but you are here. There must be a reason." Marcus knelt beside the nearest pod, studying the crystal technology. It was far beyond anything humanity had developed. But the basic principles seemed similar to their own life support systems. The problem was power. The pods needed a massive, steady energy source to keep functioning. "Arya," he called into his comm, "I need you to analyze these stasis systems. Can we help them?" Static filled his earpiece before Arya's voice came through. "Captain, the technology is incredible, but the power requirements are enormous. Each pod needs approximately 10 times the output of our entire ship's reactor." Marcus felt his heart sink. Even if he could somehow connect the Prometheus's power systems to the palace, It wouldn't be nearly enough to save 14 lives. But then he remembered something his engineering instructor had taught him years ago. When you can't solve a problem with more power, solve it with better thinking. Lyrelai, how does your stasis technology work exactly? The princess explained the complex biocrystal matrix that maintained life functions, while time passed at an incredibly slow rate inside the pods. Marcus listened carefully, his mind racing through possibilities. What if we didn't need to power 14 pods?
He asked suddenly.
What if we could maintain the stasis effect with less energy? I do not understand. Marcus was already moving, examining the connections between the pods. On Earth we have a saying, work smarter, not harder. Your people built this system to be perfect, but sometimes perfection is the enemy of survival. He started tracing power conduits, looking for ways to redistribute energy. If he could link the pods in series rather than running them in parallel, if he could use the Prometheus's power core as a boost rather than a replacement. Human, Lyrelai said softly. Why are you helping us? You do not even know us. Marcus looked up from his work. Princess, where I come from, we have another saying. Today you, tomorrow me. Someday humans might need help. I hope someone like you would answer our call. For the first time since he'd arrived, Princess Lyrelai smiled. It was like watching a star being born. Marcus worked for 18 straight hours, his hands moving with desperate precision as he rewired the ancient Zephyrian stasis system. Princess Lyrelai sat beside him, growing weaker by the hour but offering what guidance she could about her people's technology. The solution wasn't elegant, but it was human. Instead of trying to power the sophisticated individual systems of each pod, Marcus created a crude but effective network. He cannibalized power relays from his own ship, strung emergency power cables through the palace corridors, and jury-rigged connections that would have made any engineer cringe. Your people would never have thought of this, Lyrelai observed, watching Marcus strip insulation from a power cable with his teeth when his tools proved inadequate. That's because your people were probably too smart, Marcus replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. Sometimes the best solution is the one that barely works. Arya's voice crackled through the comm system. Captain, I must report that you're now running the Prometheus's engines at 120% capacity. This configuration is extremely dangerous. How long can we maintain it? Unknown, sir. We've exceeded all safety parameters. Marcus looked at the sleeping forms in the crystal pods. Emperor Thalionis, his wife Empress Melania, their children and grandchildren, cousins and siblings, an entire royal bloodline that represented the last hope of a civilization that had ruled the stars for millennia. We'll make it work, he said firmly. As he connected the final power coupling, the pods began to glow more brightly. The cracks in their crystal surfaces started to seal themselves, and the pale complexions of the sleeping Zephyrians grew slightly more robust. It's working, Lyrelai whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Human, you have done what our greatest scientists could not. You have bought us time. But Marcus knew this was only a temporary solution. The jury-rigged system might last weeks or months, but eventually something would fail. They needed a permanent answer. Princess, tell me about these devourers. What exactly were they? Lyrelai's expression darkened. Beings of pure malevolent energy, they appeared without warning and consumed entire worlds, not just killing the inhabitants but erasing them from existence itself. They fed on life force, on the very essence of being alive. Did your people try to fight them? Of course. Our fleets were mighty, our weapons could crack moons and ignite suns. But none of it mattered. The Devourers simply absorbed our energy attacks and grew stronger. Our shields meant nothing to them. They passed through solid matter like it was empty space. Marcus frowned. What about other approaches? Did anyone try anything unconventional? The Zephyrian way has always been to meet force with greater force, to solve problems through the application of superior technology and power. Lyrelai paused. Perhaps that was our weakness. Over the next few days, as the improvised system held the royal family in stable stasis, Marcus learned more about the fallen Zephyrian Empire. They had been a proud, ancient civilization that valued perfection, order, and the elegant application of overwhelming technological superiority. We believed that any problem could be solved with enough knowledge and power properly applied, Lyrelai explained as they walked through the palace gardens, which were somehow still alive despite the devastation of the rest of the planet. For 30,000 years, this belief served us well. But the Devourers were different. Yes, they were chaos itself given form. They cared nothing for our logic, our power, our ancient wisdom. They simply consumed and moved on. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. An idea was forming in his mind, but it was so crazy he almost dismissed it immediately. Almost. Princess, what if the Devourers aren't gone? What if they're still out there, still hungry? Lyrelay stopped walking. What do you mean? You said they consumed the essence of life itself. But what if they didn't just destroy your empire? What if they're still feeding on it somehow? That's impossible. Our worlds are dead, our people are gone. But Marcus was already pulling out his portable scanner, running deep space analysis routines. Arya, I'm sending you some readings. Can you detect any unusual energy signatures in this system? After a few minutes, Arya responded. Captain, there are indeed strange energy patterns throughout the system. They appear to be feeding patterns, as if something is still consuming residual life force from the destroyed planets. Lyrelay's face went pale. They're still here? Still feeding on the remains of my people? Marcus felt anger building in his chest. It was a very human emotion, one that the elegant Zephyrians had probably learned to suppress long ago. But humans had never lost their capacity for righteous fury when facing injustice. If they're still here, that means they can be found, and if they can be found, they can be fought. But human, we already tried every weapon, every strategy. You tried Zephyrian weapons and Zephyrian strategies, Marcus interrupted. You tried to fight chaos with order, to overcome the illogical with perfect logic. He turned to face her, his eyes burning with determination. But I'm not Zephyrian. I'm human, and humans have been fighting impossible odds with stupid ideas since we first picked up sticks to hunt animals 10 times our size. Lyrelay stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled again. What did you have in mind? Marcus grinned back, the expression fierce and predatory in a way that would have puzzled the refined Zephyrians, but was perfectly natural for a human who had decided that something needed to die. We're going to do something so stupid, so illogical, so completely against every rule of civilized warfare that these Devourers won't see it coming. And what is that? We're going to hunt them. Marcus worked for 18 straight hours, his hands moving with desperate precision as he rewired the ancient Zephyrian stasis system. Princess Lyrelay sat beside him, growing weaker by the hour but offering what guidance she could about her people's technology. The solution wasn't elegant, but it was human. Instead of trying to power the sophisticated individual systems of each pod, Marcus created a crude but effective network. He cannibalized power relays from his own ship, strung emergency power cables through the palace corridors, and jury-rigged connections that would have made any engineer cringe. Your people would never have thought of this, Lyrelay observed, watching Marcus strip insulation from a power cable with his teeth when his tools proved inadequate. That's because your people were probably too smart, Marcus replied, wiping sweat from his forehead. Sometimes the best solution is the one that barely works. Arya's voice crackled through the comm system. Captain, I must report that you're now running the Prometheus's engines at 120% capacity. This configuration is extremely dangerous. How long can we maintain it? Unknown, sir. We've exceeded all safety parameters. Marcus looked at the sleeping forms in the crystal pods. Emperor Thalionis, his wife Empress Melania, their children and grandchildren, cousins and siblings, an entire royal bloodline that represented the last hope of a civilization that had ruled the stars for millennia. We'll make it work, he said firmly. As he connected the final power coupling, the pods began to glow more brightly. The cracks in their crystal surfaces started to seal themselves, and the pale complexions of the sleeping Zephyrians grew slightly more robust. It's working, Lyrelay whispered, her voice filled with wonder. Human, you have done what our greatest scientists could not. You have bought us time. But Marcus knew this was only a temporary solution. The jury-rigged system might last weeks or months, but eventually something would fail. They needed a permanent answer. Princess, tell me about these Devourers. What exactly were they? Lyrelay's expression darkened. Beings of pure malevolent energy, they appeared without warning and consumed entire worlds, not just killing the inhabitants but erasing them from existence itself. They fed on life force, on the very essence of being alive. Did your people try to fight them? Of course. Our fleets were mighty, our weapons could crack moons and ignite suns. But none of it mattered. The Devourers simply absorbed our energy attacks and grew stronger. Our shields meant nothing to them. They passed through solid matter like it was empty space. Marcus frowned. What about other approaches? Did anyone try anything unconventional? The Zephyrian way has always been to meet force with greater force, to solve problems through the application of superior technology and power. Lyrelai paused. Perhaps that was our weakness. Over the next few days, as the improvised system held the royal family in stable stasis, Marcus learned more about the fallen Zephyrian Empire. They had been a proud, ancient civilization that valued perfection, order, and the elegant application of overwhelming technological superiority. We believed that any problem could be solved with enough knowledge and power properly applied, Lyrelai explained as they walked through the palace gardens, which were somehow still alive despite the devastation of the rest of the planet. For 30,000 years, this belief served us well. But the Devourers were different. Yes, they were chaos itself given form. They cared nothing for our logic, our power, our ancient wisdom. They simply consumed and moved on. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. An idea was forming in his mind, but it was so crazy he almost dismissed it immediately. Almost. Princess, what if the Devourers aren't gone? What if they're still out there, still hungry? Lyrelai stopped walking. What do you mean? You said they consumed the essence of life itself. But what if they didn't just destroy your empire? What if they're still feeding on it somehow? That's impossible. Our worlds are dead, our people are gone. But Marcus was already pulling out his portable scanner, running deep space analysis routines. Arya, I'm sending you some readings. Can you detect any unusual energy signatures in this system? After a few minutes, Arya responded. Captain, there are indeed strange energy patterns throughout the system. They appear to be feeding patterns, as if something is still consuming residual life force from the destroyed planets. Lyrelai's face went pale. They're still here? Still feeding on the remains of my people? Marcus felt anger building in his chest. It was a very human emotion, one that the elegant Zephyrians had probably learned to suppress long ago. But humans had never lost their capacity for righteous fury when facing injustice. If they're still here, that means they can be found, and if they can be found, they can be fought. But human, we already tried every weapon, every strategy. You tried Zephyrian weapons and Zephyrian strategies, Marcus interrupted. You tried to fight chaos with order, to overcome the illogical with perfect logic. He turned to face her, his eyes burning with determination. But I'm not Zephyrian. I'm human, and humans have been fighting impossible odds with stupid ideas since we first picked up sticks to hunt animals 10 times our size. Lyrelai stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly she smiled again. What did you have in mind? Marcus grinned back, the expression fierce and predatory in a way that would have puzzled the refined Zephyrians, but was perfectly natural for a human who had decided that something needed to die. We're going to do something so stupid, so illogical, so completely against every rule of civilized warfare that these Devourers won't see it coming. And what is that? We're going to hunt them. The battle lasted only minutes, but it changed the course of galactic history. Marcus moved through the chamber like a force of nature, using weapons and tactics that defied every principle of advanced warfare. Each blast from his primitive shotgun sent scattered energy patterns flying, disrupting the Devourers' ability to maintain their cohesive forms. But the real weapon wasn't the gun. It was Marcus himself. The Devourers had fed on civilizations across the galaxy for eons, growing stronger with each world they consumed. They had learned to anticipate every possible response. Advanced energy, weapons, sophisticated defense systems, desperate last stands by dying civilizations, but they had never encountered anything like human stubbornness. Marcus refused to die quietly. When his shotgun ran out of ammunition, he threw it at the nearest devourer and picked up chunks of crystal debris. When those ran out, he used his bare hands. When the creatures tried to drain his life force, he channeled his fear and pain into anger and kept fighting. Arya, he called out between attacks. Are you recording this? Yes, Captain, though I must note that your vital signs are extremely concerning. Good. Make sure Princess Lyrelai sees exactly how this works. The Devourers were learning something they had never experienced before, what it felt like to be prey. For the first time in their existence, They were facing something that refused to be consumed quietly. Marcus wasn't just fighting them, he was teaching them fear. When the last devourer finally dissipated into harmless energy particles, Marcus collapsed against the shattered wall of the chamber. His body was exhausted, his life force significantly drained, but he was alive. More importantly, the feeding patterns Arya had detected throughout the system were fading. The remaining devourers, wherever they were, had felt what happened here, and were fleeing. Princess Lyrelai rushed into the chamber, her eyes wide with disbelief. Human. Marcus, you destroyed them. You actually destroyed them. Not destroyed, Marcus corrected weakly. Taught them that some prey bite back. They'll think twice before attacking anything that looks like it might fight dirty. Over the following days, as Marcus recovered and the palace's power systems stabilized with the devourers gone, something remarkable happened. The Zephyrian royal family began to wake from their stasis pods one by one. Emperor Thalionis was the first to emerge, his tall frame unfolding gracefully from the crystal chamber. He was exactly what Marcus had expected. Dignified, ancient in wisdom, with the bearing of someone who had ruled star systems. But when Lyrali explained what had happened, the Emperor's reaction surprised everyone. He laughed. "Princess," Emperor Thalionis said to his daughter, "in 30,000 years of Zephyrian civilization, no one has ever solved a crisis by insulting it to death." Empress Melania emerged next, followed by their children and extended family. Each awakening was a celebration, a piece of an ancient civilization returning to life. But more than that, it was the birth of something new. As the royal family gathered, in the palace's great hall, Marcus found himself in an unusual position. Here he was, a simple human explorer, surrounded by beings who were essentially the nobility of the galaxy's most advanced civilization. By all rights, he should have been completely out of his depth. Instead, he felt oddly at home. "Captain Chen," Emperor Thalionis said formally, "the Zephyrian Empire owes you a debt that can never be repaid. You have saved not just our lives, but the continuation of our entire civilization." "Sir, I just did what anyone would do," Marcus replied. "No," Princess Lyrelai interjected. "You did what only a human would do. Our people would have tried to outthink the problem, to find an elegant solution through superior technology and careful planning. You chose to outfight it with weapons that barely qualify as technology, and a plan that was essentially controlled insanity." Prince Aldrich, the Emperor's youngest son who appeared to be around Marcus's age, stepped forward. "The question is, what happens now? Our empire is gone, our worlds are destroyed. We are 14 survivors of a civilization that once numbered in the trillions." Marcus looked around the room at these remarkable beings, and an idea began to form. What if that's not a problem? What if that's an opportunity? "I don't understand," Empress Melania said. "Your old empire was built on the idea that problems could be solved through perfection and superior force," Marcus explained. "But that approach failed when you encountered something chaotic and unpredictable. What if your new civilization was built on different principles?" Emperor Thalionis raised an eyebrow. "What sort of principles?" Marcus grinned. "Adaptability, creativity, the willingness to try stupid ideas when smart ones don't work. The kind of thinking that says maybe the best solution isn't always the most elegant one." "You're suggesting we rebuild our civilization using human philosophy?" Prince Aldrich asked, intrigued. "I'm suggesting you rebuild it using the best of both approaches. Zephyrian wisdom and knowledge combined with human unpredictability and stubbornness." Marcus paused. "Plus, you're going to need someone who understands how to fight dirty. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and not every threat is going to be as straightforward as energy-draining parasites." Princess Lyrelai smiled that brilliant smile again. "Are you offering to help us, Marcus Chen?" "Actually," Marcus said, looking around at these remarkable beings who had somehow become the most important people in his life, "I'm offering to stay, if you'll have me." The silence that followed was profound. Then Emperor Thalionis spoke words that would echo through galactic history. "Captain Chen, Would you consider becoming family? The formal adoption ceremony was unlike anything in Zephyrian tradition, mainly because Marcus insisted on adding his own touches. Instead of the elaborate crystal chambers and ancient rituals the royal family had planned, they held it in the palace gardens under the open sky, with Arya projecting images of Earth's sunrise as backdrop. "Are you certain about this, human?" Emperor Thalionis asked as they prepared for the ceremony. "Becoming part of the Zephyrian royal family means more than just honorary titles. You would legally become one of us with all the responsibilities that entails." Marcus adjusted the simple blue robes they had given him, a color that traditionally represented new beginnings in Zephyrian culture. "Sir, I've spent most of my adult life alone in a ship, exploring empty space and talking to an AI. Finding a family is worth any responsibility you can throw at me." The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. Each member of the royal family placed a hand on Marcus's shoulders while Emperor Thalionis spoke words in ancient Zephyrian that somehow resonated in Marcus's mind without translation. "Marcus Chen of Earth," the Emperor intoned, "by choice and by deed you have proven yourself worthy of our bloodline. Not by birth, but by character. Not by heritage, but by heart. We name you Prince Marcus of the House of Thalionis, defender of the crown, brother to our blood." When the ceremony ended, Marcus found himself surrounded by siblings he had never expected to have. Princess Lyrelai had become his sister, Prince Aldrich his brother, and the entire extended family had welcomed him with a warmth that made his chest tight with emotion. "So what does a prince of the Zephyrian Empire actually do?" Marcus asked that evening as the family gathered for their first meal together in over 3 years. "Traditionally," Prince Aldrich explained with a grin, "we spent our time managing planetary governments, overseeing trade negotiations, and occasionally leading military campaigns against rebellious sectors. None of which currently exist," Princess Lyrelai added. "Actually," Empress Melania said thoughtfully, "that gives us an opportunity to redefine what it means to be Zephyrian royalty." Over the following weeks, as they worked to restore the palace and plan for the future, Marcus found himself settling into his new role in ways he hadn't expected. His technical background proved invaluable in repairing ancient Zephyrian systems, while his human perspective offered solutions to problems the family hadn't even realized they had. But more than that, he was changing them. The royal family began approaching problems differently, considering not just the elegant solution but the practical one. They started questioning whether their old ways of doing things were truly the best ways. "Marcus," Emperor Thalionis said one morning as they walked through the restored gardens, "I have been thinking about our conversation regarding the rebuilding of our civilization." "What about it, Your Majesty?" "Father," the Emperor corrected gently, "you are my son now, and I believe your idea has merit, but rebuilding the Zephyrian Empire will require more than just 14 people, no matter how determined." Marcus nodded. "I've been thinking about that too. What if we didn't rebuild the old empire? What if we built something new?" "Go on." "The galaxy is full of species that were oppressed or ignored by the major powers. Refugees, outcasts, people who don't fit into the established order. What if instead of trying to reclaim your old territory, we offered them something different?" Emperor Thalionis stopped walking. "You're suggesting we become patrons to the dispossessed?" "I'm suggesting we become family to anyone who needs one," Marcus said. "The Zephyrian royal family could be more than just bloodline. It could be about choice, about proving yourself through action rather than accident of birth." The idea sparked something in the Emperor's ancient eyes, a chosen family rather than a born one. Exactly. And with Zephyrian technology, human adaptability, and whoever else joins us, we could actually make a difference in the galaxy. That conversation led to another, and another, until the entire royal family was involved in planning something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization based not on conquest or territory, but on the radical idea that family was something you chose, not something you were born into. They started small. Area: monitoring galactic communications identified a refugee ship stranded in a nearby system. The passengers were Vicari, a species known for their mechanical expertise but exiled from their homeworld for refusing to participate in a war they considered unjust. "What do we do?" Princess Lyrelai asked as they watched the refugee ship's distress signals. Marcus smiled. "We answer the call. That's what family does. The rescue mission was Marcus's first official act as a prince of the Zephyrian royal family, and it set the tone for everything that followed. Instead of simply offering aid, they offered choice. "Join us," Prince Aldrich told the Vakari refugees, not as subjects or servants, but as family. "Help us build something new." The Vakari, led by an elderly engineer named Korvash who had been fighting hopeless battles for decades, looked at this offer with deep suspicion. "And what do you expect in return?" Korvash asked. "Help us fix things," Marcus replied simply. "Help us build things. Help us protect things that need protecting. Be part of a family that's bigger than any one species or world." Korvash studied Marcus for a long moment. "You are human, yes?" "I have heard stories. Your people are unusual, guilty as charged. And you are truly royal family now? Not servant, not advisor, but actual royalty?" "According to the paperwork, yes." Korvash's expression shifted to something like wonder. A human prince in the Zephyrian royal family, offering membership to Vakari refugees. He started laughing, a sound like rusty machinery coming to life. "The galaxy has indeed become a strange place. Is that a yes?" "That," Korvash said, "is definitely a yes." 5 years after Marcus Chen answered a desperate cry for help, the Zephyrian royal family had grown from 14 survivors to over 3,000 members representing 47 different species. The palace had been expanded into a sprawling complex that served as both home and headquarters for what had become known throughout the galaxy as the New Zephyrian Alliance. Prince Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital station above the restored planet, watching as ships from across the galaxy arrived daily. Some brought refugees seeking shelter, others brought allies offering partnership, and still others brought challenges that required the unique combination of ancient wisdom and creative chaos that had become the Alliance's signature. "Nervous?" Princess Lyra Lai asked, joining him at the viewing window. She wore the adaptive armor that Korvash and his Vakari engineers had developed, technology that combined Zephyrian energy matrices with human practical design philosophy and Vakari mechanical expertise. "A little," Marcus admitted. 5 years ago, I was just a ship captain exploring empty space. Now I'm helping to lead a multi-species alliance that's reshaping galactic politics." Having second thoughts, Marcus watched as a massive Therielian transport ship docked with the station, bringing another group of beings seeking to join their growing family. Not even for a second. The transformation hadn't always been smooth. They'd faced challenges that would have broken a traditional empire: territorial disputes, resource shortages, cultural clashes between species that had been enemies for centuries. But each crisis had been met with the same approach that had saved the royal family in the first place: creative solutions, stubborn determination, and the willingness to try ideas that seemed absolutely insane. When the Kalari Trade Federation tried to impose economic sanctions on Alliance worlds, Marcus had responded by declaring the Alliance's entire economy to be based on voluntary mutual aid, rather than traditional currency exchanges. The Kalari spent 6 months trying to figure out how to sanction an economy that didn't technically exist. When the Hraxan military threatened to invade Alliance space, Prince Aldrich had challenged their fleet commander to single combat using weapons of the commander's choice. The Hraxan had expected sophisticated energy weapons or at least modern projectile systems. Instead, Aldrich had arrived with a sword and somehow managed to defeat a warrior who had been trained from birth for combat. The secret, as Marcus had taught him, was fighting dirty and refusing to follow the expected patterns. "The Galactic Council session is in 2 hours, Lirale reminded him. "Are you ready for the presentation?" Marcus grinned. "I've been ready for months." The Galactic Council had been watching the Alliance's growth with increasing concern. A multi-species organization that ignored traditional boundaries and power structures was seen as a threat to the established order. They had demanded that Alliance representatives appear before the Council to explain their intentions and submit to regulation. The Council chambers were an imposing sight, designed to humble petitioners before the assembled might of galactic civilization. Representatives from hundreds of worlds sat in judgment as Marcus and the royal family took their places in the center of the vast chamber. "Prince Marcus, Chen of the Zephyrian Alliance," the council speaker intoned, "you stand accused of destabilizing galactic order, of harboring refugees in violation of territorial agreements, and of conducting unlawful military operations against established governments." Marcus stood calmly, wearing the simple blue robes that had become his signature, rather than the elaborate formal wear the council expected. "Counselor, I stand accused of helping people who needed help. If that's destabilizing galactic order, then maybe galactic order needs to be destabilized." A ripple of shock went through the assembled representatives. No one spoke to the Galactic Council that way. "Furthermore," Marcus continued, "we're not here to ask permission. We're here to offer an alternative. For too long, this galaxy has been divided between those who have power and those who don't. Between species that matter and species that are ignored. Between the civilized and the disposable." He gestured to where members of the Alliance delegation sat. Zephyrians and humans, Vicari and Thoralians, dozens of species that had never before been represented in these chambers. The Alliance offers something different, not ruled by the strongest or the oldest or the most technologically advanced, but family. Real family, chosen family, earned family. "This is absurd," the Kalari representative interrupted. "Governments cannot be based on sentiment. Order requires hierarchy structure, legitimate authority." "Does it?" Marcus asked. "Because I've seen what legitimate authority accomplishes. I've seen the devourer-devastated worlds that your patrols were too busy maintaining order to protect. I've seen refugee ships that drift for years because helping them would violate territorial agreements." He turned to address the entire council. "The Alliance has grown from 14 people to 3,000 in 5 years. Not through conquest or coercion, but because we offer something that apparently doesn't exist anywhere else in this galaxy. The radical idea that everyone deserves to belong somewhere." Emperor Thalionis rose from his seat, his ancient presence commanding attention even in these chambers. "Honored Council, my son speaks truth, but perhaps not the complete truth. The Alliance is not merely about sentiment or belonging. It is about effectiveness." He activated a holographic display showing charts and statistics. "In 5 years, Alliance worlds have eliminated piracy in 4 sectors, resolved the Kethran food shortage, and mediated peace agreements between 6 traditionally hostile species. We have accomplished this not through superior firepower or economic pressure, but through the simple expedient of treating every problem as a family problem." "And how?" the council speaker asked skeptically. "Does one solve territorial disputes by treating them as family problems?" Prince Aldrich stood. "By remembering that families fight, but they don't destroy each other. When the Morvani and the Zerillian colonies were fighting over mining rights in the Epsilon sector, traditional diplomacy failed for 3 years. We solved it in 6 weeks by asking one simple question: what would make both groups happy? The answer," Princess Lyrelay added, "was joint mining operations with shared profits and cross-training programs so both species could learn each other's techniques. Everyone got more than they would have gotten alone." Marcus looked around the chamber at the faces of representatives who had spent centuries managing a galaxy through force and bureaucracy. That's what families do. They find ways for everyone to win. The debate continued for hours, but Marcus could see the shift happening. Not agreement, not yet, but consideration. For the first time in galactic history, someone was offering an alternative to the ancient cycle of conquest and submission. When the session ended, the Galactic Council's decision was unprecedented. They would grant the Alliance conditional recognition as an independent entity, with the understanding that this was an experiment in governance that would be closely monitored. As the royal family left the council chambers, Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder. Emperor Thalionis smiled at his adopted son. "Well done, Marcus. Though I suspect this is only the beginning." Marcus looked back at the towering spires of the Galactic Council building, then up at the stars visible through the transparent dome overhead. Somewhere out there were billions of beings who had given up hope of finding somewhere they belonged. Refugees, outcasts, the lost and forgotten. "You're right," he said. "This is definitely just the beginning." In the months that followed, as ships continued to arrive at Alliance space carrying those who sought family rather than government, Marcus often thought about the distress signal that had changed everything. A desperate cry for help sent by a young princess who had never given up hope that someone would answer. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most human thing you could do was refuse to let hope die. Even when logic said it was pointless, even when the odds were impossible, even when everyone else had given up, especially then. The galaxy was a vast and often hostile place, but it was also full of people who just wanted to belong somewhere. And now, thanks to one human who had been too stubborn to ignore a cry for help, they had a place to call home.